The Universal Basic Education Commission, the Nigerian Population Commission, and the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics, after several months of disagreeing on the number of out-of-school children in Nigeria, came up with a figure last March and said that the number of out-of-school children in Nigeria is actually 10.3 million. Whether it is still the old figure being peddled by UNICEF or whatsoever, the figure is above 10 million, and that's a crisis point for the situation we have at our hands. Why do we have that number of out-of-school children? What must we do to address some of these challenges? This will be our focus this morning as we look at the topic, reducing the number of out-of-school children in Nigeria.
Yes, we know that education is key to success, and any society that wants visible development must actually see how they'll make their education sector a better one. And that's why we are here to discuss this topic, reducing the number of out-of-school children right here in Nigeria and possibly in Anambra State.
All right, and we have Professor Ifeanyi Ezako, a professor at the Pulse University, Oka, join us this morning to look at this issue. Good morning and welcome.
Thank you, viewers.
All right. Looking at what we said when we started, the number, whether 10.3 million or 13.2 million as peddled by UNICEF, Nigeria has the highest number of out-of-school children in the world. How did we get here?
Well, to have such figure, either estimated, overestimated, or than estimated is still bad. Even if it is only 5 million people that are out of school children, it is a situation building calamities for this country in the next few years. 5 million is much people out of school, which means we are breeding a segment of children that will come up sometime in future without anything like character formation, anything like intellectual development. And when we have this very down for the future, the country is not moving anywhere.
How did we get here? Sorry. How did we get here? How did we get to this number?
Yeah, well, we may get to the number because of some biting economic circumstances. That is, many people do not have enough money to send their children, and then parents not even loving their children. I remember what Bertrand Russell said sometime, that parents do not love their children. To give them that education, the education that will develop their integrity, the education that will make them become people who will now produce something positively for the nation. And if parents can now have such attitude to their children, it means parents are also contributing. They are not even caring. They only care for themselves.
What about the government? Because 7 days ago, the Minister of Education, Anambra, apologized because he promised earlier that before his tenure, they are going to reduce the number of out-of-school children by half, but that they couldn't do it. Now, it was initially 13.2 million, and now it's 10.3 million out-of-school children. Now, if a minister promised to do that, and he couldn't fulfill his promise, he's apologizing now. Does it show how serious we are with the education sector in Nigeria today?
They may be serious in a way, but there is no proper planning. Somebody can be serious to do something, but he has not just made some steps to achieving the end. So the minister can say, by this time we shall have 0% of out-of-school children, but has not mapped out how that can be achieved, that by the government. What is the effort of the government to make every child go to school? It's not just forcing them to go to school. They will make school an interested area. Children will love to go to school. Every morning, children will like to rush to school. That's why we are now having private schools private schools to help. But even the private schools that are helping, the government is not even helping the private groups to make that education.
Okay. Prof, before you continue, you're a professor and you're part of the education system. Are professors, are teachers actually making the school interesting for those children to learn?
Well, some professors, some teachers, in fact, every teacher, a professor is a teacher. Even a kindergarten school teacher is a teacher, because you are molding the character. You are building up the intellectual level of individuals. Some teachers do not even care about the students. They don't care. What they only want is, at the end of the month, they receive their salary. And some even do not even want to develop their own intellectual capabilities. I mean, the teachers. They only remain, go to the class, teach, go back home, and in fact, go back to business. So they do not attract the interest of the students. I know some teachers, especially in the tertiary institution, they will give an assignment and then bet the students. Any person who makes the best or the highest mark, we have so thing. Just something not so tangible. I know one who just a bottle of Coke for the highest scorer. Everybody will struggle. And then at the end, you may see 2 or 3 people having the same score. Then he has to provide 3 bottles of Coke. That's an incentive. It will make every child try to learn. But those who may say, like many schools, the lecturers or teachers will be calling the students to come to class.
Okay, before we look at let's leave lecturers now for now, because the situation at that level is pathetic. Let's look at our education sector at the basic level.
Now, basic level.
At the basic level.
Yes,
what's the education like? What have we encouraged? Does the system actually encourage young persons to stay in school?
One is the children may be encouraged in one way or the other, just as I used university to give an exam. It's just the same thing in the lower level, the basic. If a teacher comes to the class and says, if you do this, I will give you 1 pencil, 1 book, 1 exercise book, or you show them 1 sort of a picture books, especially at the very low level, every child will try to be attentive in the class. But the fact is, many of the teachers don't even show interest in the children. They may be waiting for the parents of the children to come and give them something, so that at the end of exams, the teacher gives some marks or award marks to somebody who is not actually meritable to score such. And then somebody who has been struggling may have about 40%. Somebody who has been lousing about may score 70%. Then it will now kill the interest of the industrious ones.
You know, talking about children that are out of school, we know that there are a lot of children that want to be in school today, but they are not here. Maybe they are not privileged enough to be there. So we want you to point out the causes.
The causes mainly from the parents at the initial stage. I remember where I live at Oka, I every day saw one particular boy just moving about when others are gone to school. I asked this boy, why don't you go to school? He said, Daddy, Papa anye nwere ego. I asked this boy, but do you want to go to school? He said, yes. Okay. Where do you want to go? He pointed one school. I had to go to the father. Why don't this boy go to school? He said, I don't have money and I don't have any person to help. But do you want this boy to go to school? He said, yes. I went to the primary school very close, talked to the head teacher, copied out necessary things, dress and so on. I got this boy, went to the school, primary school. From that primary school, we worked on him. My family worked on him, and then he finished primary school, went into secondary school. When he was in JS3, that was the time that man's sister came to assist. And do you know, assisting, he took the boy up to Abuja. And the boy was there. When I saw him back, I said, have you finished your school, sir? You see, the boy stopped at JS3. So sometimes parents and those people who are supposed to urge the younger ones to go to school, they are not there. Not that they are not there, but they are not willing. Sometimes they feel that if you nurse that boy up, he may outpace his or her own children. And so they don't encourage. So parents, poverty, then government should look at these places and then make children, every child, compulsory education. And that compulsory education, the government must be able to equip the school, put attractive something, even the school environment. Make areas for games and so on. It's not just some of these private schools who just have a bacha. No space for games. The child will only remain in the class. A little time, say break. And break, what do they do at the break? Break period, at the time these children will go and exercise themselves and then reactivate the brain so that when they go back to the class, their brain or whatever the mind will be open to accept more.
All right, we'll continue with what government must do to address this inequality in our society when we come back from this break. We spoke to some people on the streets, and this is what they have to say about the topic for discussion. Stay with us.
I believe that if government can come up with a free education system, it will go a long way. Because actually there are families that want to but don't have the wherewithal, they don't have the capacity. And we believe that this thing has worked before. I believe there's a need to come back to our senses. Let government and well-meaning people begin to stand up to this responsibility. Let us create free education. It's possible, it has been done before. Other countries are doing it. Nigeria is not exceptional.
This is an alarming situation in society. But one thing that government should do one thing by giving a free education. Not only giving a free education, they should implement it to the letter and make sure that they force it on parents. That's a must that they should send their children, their world to school. And they have to have a registration that will mandate the parents, whether they like it or not, to make sure that their children are in the school and to minimize this street hawking.
Government should try either create a scholarship program for children, or they should also, say something like, okay, parents, you bring 30%, why government brings 70%? Like making sure that some materials for students are available, or maybe pay a particular amount of fee for them. Why parents try their best to either provide their school uniform or other things. Government should also try. In fact, government should try and help students out. Some parents don't have at all. Some struggle to feed.
The most important aspect relies on the government. Because if I have much, I don't have to send my children, to go and work on the streets. If government should play the role, the aspect of, creating a nice environment for the youth, at the end of the day, by the time you leave school, you get a nice job, I think it will help.
All right, welcome back. It's still Good Morning Anambra. We are looking at reducing the number of out-of-school children in Nigeria. Anambra also as part of Nigeria across board. And we have Professor Ifeanyi Ezak also with us here. Looking at this very important topic. We also have looked at the causes, how we got to 10.3 million out-of-school children in Nigeria. And then we want to continue the discussion. He was raising issues about what government will do. And when we went to the streets, you also had people speaking on what government must do. Let's now look at some of those who spoke to us on the streets, advocated for free education. The other person advocated for education subsidy, a case where parents pay a percentage of the tuition fee and government pays the other. But we know that over time, since 2009, the allocation of federal government to education sector has never passed 10%. How do we do this?
Okay, that is why even those the public is saying that government must have a very powerful role in education. When the child is in the school, it's not just the parents It is the government. And when it is the government, it is for the entire society. Which means government must bear the bulk of necessary things for education. And then you see, making education compulsory is one thing. And then making education attractive is another. If it is compulsory and the government has not even given something, that is a subsidy, or even infrastructure, making the environment attractive, then children will not like to go there. And parents will just not feel that giving out my child to school, yes, is nothing. Instead, the child will be carrying these granite, pure water, and whatever on the street, hawking. And then when they are hawking, they are in another form of education. A child who is hawking from morning till evening, under the sun, under the threat of hooligans. You see some of them, the young girls who are about 7 years, 8 years, will be caressed by some of these touts. And then vulgar language is poured into them. And these children, instead of having knowledge that will make them become good people, they are having knowledge that will make them very rascally and, in fact, immoral in the society. And this is the time when the child has grown up. You will be hearing about getting pregnancy for girls and then dumping the baby. Or for the boys, getting into cultic life, killing themselves because they have not got good education. So because they are out of school, they don't have anything to do. That's why I say, an idle brain is a devil's workshop. So,
moving back to the basics, we know that most of these unity schools, their tuition fee is reduced. That's when you compare it to the private schools. But then when you get there, you see that most of them are overcrowded. And the federal government, just recently, they're saying they are hoping to increase the spaces in unity schools to help accommodate some of these out-of-school children. Do you think that this measure will help to reduce the number of pupils that are out of school?
You are talking of very few unity schools. Very few, there are very few. What about the basic in the villages? How many of these children go to school? How do we see them in the school? Is the federal government talking about unity schools or the state government talking about government schools? Are we now seeing the authorities planning ahead? But the problem is, they don't plan ahead. They don't see the explosion of population. And when you have the explosion of population, it means you have to expand schools.
Why are they not planning ahead? Why does it seem as if government at all levels, we've seen reforms in education, especially in Anambra, we've seen improvements, but it still seems as if the best has not been given. Why does it seem as if, or why is it that education still remains at the lowest cadre of planning in government? How do we address that challenge?
Sometimes you may have people who are not really qualified to be responsible for education. I mean, either commissioners or ministers or whatever, who will now sit down and think of the future. 10 years' time, I used to ask my students, how do you want to see yourself in the next 10 years? That is trying to plan ahead. If you finish from the university, if you finish from secondary school, what type of studies, what type of education do you want to further? Some in the secondary school we say, until I finish my secondary school, I have not even got any idea. Because this child has not been motivated. What they can now see, they don't have role models in the society. Those people who went to school are not making it more than every other person. For instance, some of us who are teachers, they will say, he's a professor, is this and that, he's a headmaster. He has not got a good house, no upstairs. Then we don't see a child being motivated to go to school so as to get something higher. But they don't know that education helps one for character formation. Character formation, humility, respect, values, which now build somebody. Then the government should also, I know Anambra State is doing very, very well. That's why they've been succeeding in beating other schools. I'm happy about that. What I may add more to Anambra State is to pursue libraries for schools. Whether primary school, let there be small library. Secondary school, library. So that the child, when they are on recess or break, they can go into the library, glance through some books. Then they will say, hey, I got such information from the library. Another person will rush in there. Then people will say, our school doesn't have any library. We don't have books. But now, if all the schools, both primary, wherever, has some form of library, and somebody, a librarian, will be around there to advise or direct, then their children will no longer fall out. Parents will now be seeing something new in their children when they come into their homes. I remember a mother who was correcting her child one particular language. Then the child said, Mommy, what are you teaching me? This is what our teacher taught us. Do you know more than our teacher? Then they see teachers as examples of knowledge. So if they can't go to even tell the truth to their parents, we have got this from our teacher. It means our teacher is trying.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. But I think we will pause here. We go on a short break. When we come back, we continue with the discussion. Don't go anywhere.
For news and updates, like us on Facebook at ABS Radio Television. Watch exciting programs and news updates on our YouTube channel at ABS Radio TV Online. Like us on Twitter at ABS Radio TV and on Instagram at ABS Radio TV. www.absradiotv.com. ABS, Heartbeat of the East.
ABS, Heartbeats of the East.
You're welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Anambra, where we are discussing how we can reduce the number of out-of-school children in Nigeria and also in Anambra State, even though we know that in Anambra State we don't really have a much number of out-of-school children. And now we've been talking about the courses, the challenges facing the educational sector right here in Nigeria. And now we talked about creating conducive environment for these children to study, you know. So how are we going to create that conducive environment to make education seem fun to these children?
Yeah, I said earlier, the environment must be attractive. Classrooms must be enough and also attractive. And then the library must be upgraded. That is, every school must have some library. And then parents, of course, people must realize that the wealth of every nation depends on the education of the citizens. Wealth of a nation. If a nation has very low educated people, that is where you see violence, kidnapping, and so on. Because an educated person cannot think of violence, can never think of kidnapping and so on, armed robbery. Because what he had gathered from the primary school to secondary to wherever, we now discipline him. So what we do is, the government has to do that. Encourage parents to send their children. Some parents may say it is very costly to send a child, but if we try ignorance, we see how bad ignorance is.
What about the attitude of some teachers to students? Because we notice that a lot of students, when they come back from school, you ask them, they will tell you that they don't like this teacher. He's too hostile, he doesn't teach well and all that. What about their attitude? And then we are talking about guardian counselors in schools, because a lot of times you notice that some children are misbehaving, but if they have a counselor to help them maybe retrace their steps, I think this will help. So what about those ones? How do we help, or what are we going to do to see that they are there to perform their duties?
Some children tell lies about their teachers, which is true. When they don't want to go to school, they will give the teacher bad name. I know I lied like that sometime when I was small. I didn't go to school in time. I was late to school. And when I came near the school, if I had entered, I would be flogged very well. So what I did was to be hiding. At a time, I would just go home before other children would come back. And then I lie on my bed, take mat, cover myself. And when I hear my parents coming in, I'll be shivering that I have cold.
Sorry.
So it is telling like the teacher.
Let's not give it only to the children now. Yes, some children lie, we know. When we are lazy to go to school, we normally do that.
Yes.
But there are situations. I had a teacher in primary school who was selling chewing gum and biscuits. If you don't buy from her, you automatically will have issues in her class. If you go to the school canteen to buy things, to get angry. And you know that to an extent, you won't blame her because she's finding alternative sources of income. Statistics has it that in Nigeria, the salary of teachers are between $1,000 and $1,200 per year.
Yes.
So generally, there are teachers also who feel that because they are teachers, automatically they are gods to these children. How does that affect our education system and how children perceive education?
Yes, teachers do that. I know some teachers who will sell their textbooks, the books they wrote. Now, they will force a child or children to buy those books. They have their names written down. If you buy the book, he will just tick good. If you don't, that person will fail the exam.
You're talking about the lecturers.
Yes, not only
out and all that.
They do that.
It's no longer lecturers. I had a mathematics teacher in secondary school
Yes,
who
they
sold
still
his textbooks and he collected
So
names.
they just do that in order to augment what they have. And you may discover, I mean, some teachers these days don't feel that they need to live a life that is humble. Contentment is not in many of them. They want to be, if I am now a teacher, and I want to have the type of house built by an industrialist, I'm making a mistake. Which means some teachers scare away their children from school, from getting education, because their teacher imposes some type of conditions for them to go to school.
But Prof, shouldn't we increase the salaries of teachers?
If you increase the salary.
Like in South Africa, an average teacher is paid between 250 and 350,000 in our own naira compared to what we have here.
Yes.
Don't you think if we pay them and they live well, they will also have time to sleep well and also teach well?
To relate to these
that is
children in
a
good
teacher who has a good conscience.
Okay.
If you give him enough money, he will eat better food, he will buy books, he will read, he will research, and give out. After all, a teacher is to pour out the knowledge he has acquired to his children, so that in future you'll be proud of these people.
Finally, Prof, we've touched almost planning and what we must do. It now lies on the stakeholders to do it. But there's another aspect I just want us to touch before we begin to round up. The issue of children with disabilities and also children of parents who move, migrant families, pastoralists, and people who live in farm settlements. How do we improve their access to education as well?
Well, the physically impaired should have special schools. But we don't have special teachers for them. We don't have. I'm happy Anambra State is trying to build up sign education. Sign education. I wanted to study it when I was at Jos. I was interested. But because of short period, I was to be there. But if we can now have teachers for specialist teachers for these handicapped pupils, that will help. Anambra State is starting it, sign education. And then if that is done, you see the segment of children in the society will be happy. And then teachers themselves will be given some form of workshops, seminars. Because if you don't attend seminars, if you don't have workshops, you cannot improve.
All right.
And then sort of money. If you give more money, some people can become arrogant of that wealth.
Okay.
So see the two sides of it.
All right.
All right. As we are rounding up, we know that these children, when they're out of school, they face a lot of problems. Most of them join bad gangs and all that. So, like, before we go, what's your advice to this one? Maybe as we are trying to see that we'll bring them back to school.
Any person who wants to live a good life must go to school and have education that plans, that shapes the individual character. And then we make the person move forward. These people who manufacture bicycles, this and that. I learned somebody just built a helicopter, a secondary school child. Because the intellectual capability is now put into him and he wanted to put it into practice. So if we now know that if I go to school, I can be this, I can be that. There's nothing that is that is greater than knowledge and achievements in life.
All right, thank you, Professor Ifeanyi Ezeaku, for joining us on Good Morning Anambra and for making your calls on how we're going to reduce the number of out-of-school children this morning. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, sir.
Professor Ifeanyi Ezeaku is an academic at the Pulse University, Oka. And that's how far we run this morning. The calls have been made, the policy directions and plans have been made. It is left for us to begin to implement some of this for a better society. I am David Obokwasele.
And I am Chidimma Orangwa. Thank you so much for joining us today.